people don't realize, the Civil War,
Yeah.
you think about it, why? People don't ask that question. But why was there the Civil War? Why could that one not have been worked out?
Let's discuss now with CNN political commentators David Swerdlick, Alice Stewart, Andre Bauer, and Bakari Sellers. Good evening to all of you. I suggest everyone at home sit down. I'm sure this is going to be very interesting. Andre, what do you think the president meant there?
Well, I think he meant a couple of things. Number one, Jackson was known to be a very tough negotiator. He was a man of courage, and he was sought to advance the rights of the common man, much like Trump. And he was the only president, I believe, to pay off the national debt. So those were the things that I actually thought that Trump was at least
so what does that have to do with the Civil War?
Compared himself to.
What does that have to do with the Civil War?
Well, he thinks that Jackson was a leader, and one of Jackson's quote was, "One man with courage makes a majority," and I believe that he thought he might be able to have spearheaded an effort to, in fact, keep the Union together. Actually, Lincoln did much of the same thing.
Okay, so you're thinking he's comparing himself to Andrew Jackson?
Well, he compared himself. He likes Jackson. He's gone to Jackson.
But that's Selena just said she
state.
didn't think he was comparing himself to Andrew Jackson.
Well, we know he likes him. We know he has admiration for him, and he likes him because of supposedly being a populist, being a guy who really kind of fought the institution. Okay. But here's an interesting, just little thing to take in. Here Trump is with the two founders of the Democratic Party still hanging in the Oval Office, Jefferson and Jackson, the very two people that the Democratic Party reveres. They have their party, every year, what's about March or so. They have
Andre,
a big
what does
party
that have to do
together.
with the
It's a big
Civil
fundraiser.
War?
President Obama.
What does that have to do with the Civil War, Andre?
You're beating up Trump.
I'm not beating him up. I'm asking you. I'm beating you up right now. I'm not beating you up.
I'm telling you that these are two Democrats that are revered by the Democrat Party. So if you want to tie somebody and beat them up, I mean, they're the people that raise the money for them. That's who they revere. And Trump's not a Republican or a Democrat. This guy's an independent, quite frankly. He's got different party leaders hanging in his office.
He's not a Republican?
Trying to get things done, and it's just I think he's more of an independent, quite frankly. He's trying to work with both parties.
Don, can I look?
Yeah, go ahead.
I will almost agree with Andre, with Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, Andre Bauer, that President Trump is not a conservative, but he is a Republican. He ran as a Republican.
I didn't say that.
I'm saying it. He is a Republican. He's the titular head of the Republican Party. But to Don's question, I think the problem here is that it's okay to acknowledge, as our colleague Selena said in the previous segment, that President Jackson was complicated, right? He was a hero of 1812 war. He opened the doors of the White House on his inauguration to the common man, all that. But he also, but at the end of that quote by the president, to say that, President Jackson would have done something to avoid the Civil War. I mean, it's at best, it's highly speculative. A war in which 600 or 700,000 people died so that the South could hang on to slavery. It's almost as if he was implying in a sort of, loosey-goosey way that, if President Jackson had just been able to get, his adversaries down to the Mar-a-Lago of his day, and they could have hashed it out over lunch, that they would have avoided the Civil
Sumter
War
or something.
Hey,
Okay.
Don, with regard to the actual statement, look, in terms of what Selena said, yes, Andrew Jackson was a unionist. He supported keeping the Union together. And to Donald Trump's point with regard to whether or not he could have prevented the Civil War, no one knows that. But he did say, one of the quotes that stands out in my mind with regard to Andrew Jackson is, look, if the Union is separated, the divide will grow wider and wider. And he did predict that the complications and the controversies would eventually be resolved on the field of battle and determined by the sword. So while he predicted it could end in war, it doesn't mean in any way, shape, or form that he could have prevented it. So I think I understand what the president was trying to say, but it was wrong.
Bakari in his tweet, Bakari, I'm going to let you finish, Bakari. He's President Andrew Jackson, who died 16 years before the Civil War started, saw it coming and was angry, would never have let it happen. He's saying he could have prevented it. Go ahead, Bakari.
With all due respect to Selena and Elise and everybody else who's on this panel, I don't find too many redeeming qualities from Andrew Jackson. The fact is he was genocidal. The fact is he was a butcher. The fact is he murdered a number of Native Americans.
Right.
and then he owned 150 slaves. So for anyone to have the audacity to sit here and do this revisionist history, and people talk about the race card, and people talk about white-splaining, and people talk about whitewashing, this is exactly what we're talking about. The fact is, the Civil War was about race. The Civil War was about slavery. I just want to admit to everyone watching around the world, Andrew Jackson was not going to own slaves and stop the Civil War at the same time. This is revisionist history, and it's ludicrous that we have to have this argument.
Andre, after the break.
If that's
after
the
break,
case,
we'll be right back. All right, and we're back now with the panel. I did not mean to cut you off, Andre, but I got to get to the breaks. That's what we do. So you were saying what? Are you responding to Bakari?
Well, first off, I know Bakari's very passionate about this, and Bakari's one of my best buddies, so I never want to overstep the line. But if the Democrats are passionate like Bakari is, really they should probably get rid of him as their annual fundraiser. Some states like South Carolina actually don't call it the Jefferson-Jackson dinner. But we really shouldn't gauge everyone by today's standards from 150 years ago. These gotcha moments really aren't healthy for the debate and the discussion. We should have the discussion, but to compare everybody by today's standards is really probably unfair. But Donald Trump spoke this. He believed in it, and he believed that possibly he was a leader that could have prevented the Civil War. I don't think that's a bad thing to have that discussion.
But how is that a gotcha thing? If he's factually inaccurate,
but Don,
what's
Don,
wrong
I think,
with pointing that out and having a discussion about it? That's not a gotcha, Andre.
But Don, I agree. Like in the most weird way, I agree with Andre. I mean, in South Carolina, we abandoned the Jefferson-Jackson dinner. I agree with that. You can tear down as many monuments as you want to, like Mitch Landrieu, my good friend in New Orleans, and you can take down a Confederate flag, but you can't take down the remnants of white supremacy. You can't take down these remnants of oppression from everywhere because they're systemic. I actually agree with that. The most difficult conversation we have in the United States of America is a conversation about race. That is the most difficult conversation. The original sin of this country is the fact that we had slavery. This country is built upon slavery, and to quote my good friend Angela Rye, we built this for free. This conversation that Donald Trump had is indicative of so many people who just want to whitewash, white-splain, and want to have a revisionist history about our country.
So,
let's
Bakari,
talk about race in a sincere fashion.
Okay, so then that's my point then. If we're going to use this to talk about race, which it is, the Civil War is about race, then we have to be honest about it. And you cannot sit on television and say this is, or write and say this is a got you moment to the President of the United States. If the leader of the free world is talking about race and the Civil War in an inaccurate way, then it should be pointed out, because then it does become revisionist history. Do you disagree with that, Alice?
I agree 100% with you, and I also agree with what Bakari said earlier. It defies reality for a president, Andrew Jackson, who owned not just a few slaves but a lot of slaves, to say that he would not ultimately would be able to do anything to stop the Civil War. In addition to that, supporting the removal of Native Americans from their homeland. So this is someone that his history and his personal record defies the statement that he would have done anything to prevent the Civil War. So I think that is factually inaccurate on the part of this president, but it does open up a conversation that maybe it's time for us to have. But the statement itself, I think, is just wrong on its face.
David, we know that this president is a lot less red than the last two presidents, Bush and Obama. Is he ignorant about history?
Yes, certainly in this case. Look, the gotcha moment is not the president's affinity or interest in Andrew Jackson. The gotcha moment is the latter part of that exchange with Selena, where he says, you know, the Civil War, why? You know, people are asking, why did this happen? I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but people are not asking that. We know why the Civil War happened. It happened because of slavery. The states fought a war over slavery. For the president to, you know, it's almost done like he's learning American history on the job. A few weeks ago, he said at a speech, a lot of people don't know that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. Yes, they do.
I thought the same
That's
thing.
why it's called the Party of Lincoln. He said Frederick Douglass is, I'm glad to see him getting more run these days.
More and more attention.
More and more. No, Frederick Douglass was an American hero and abolitionist. Look, it's one thing for the average person not to know all these facts years after going to school. We all get away from our history from time to time. It's important for the President of the United States to know these things.
Well said. We'll be right back.